The clock on the wall of the police station showed just past 10 p.m. Officer Tom Rodriguez yawned and stretched in his chair, thinking about the hot shower and comfortable bed waiting for him at home. His 12-hour shift had been busy: 3 fender benders, a shoplifting case at the local grocery store, and endless paperwork. His eyes felt heavy, and the coffee in his mug had gone cold hours ago. Just 30 more minutes, he muttered to himself, clicking through the last incident report on his computer. The station was quiet except for the hum of fluorescent lights and the occasional ring of phones at the front desk. His partner, Officer Lily Chen, was organizing her locker nearby. Unlike Tom, who had 15 years on the force, Lily had joined just 3 years ago. What she lacked in experience, she made up for in dedication. The other officers often joked that she memorized the entire police handbook before her first day. Ready to call it a night? Lily asked, slinging her bag over her shoulder. She had already changed out of her uniform into jeans and a dark blue sweater. Tom nodded, saving his report. More than ready. My daughter has a soccer game tomorrow morning, and I promised I'd. The radio on his desk crackled to life. Units available for a 10 to 90 at 347 Maple Street. Caller reports unusual noises from a vacant residence. Tom and Lily exchanged looks. A noise complaint this late usually meant teenagers partying in an empty house or neighbors being overly sensitive about normal sounds. Either way, it was rarely anything serious. Dispatch, this is Unit 17, Tom responded after a moment's hesitation. We're still on duty. We'll take it. Lily raised an eyebrow. Seriously, we're off in 20 minutes. Tom shrugged as he stood up, reaching for his jacket. It's on our way home anyway. Probably nothing. We check it out, tell some kids to go home, and we're done in 10 minutes. The drive to Maple Street was quiet. The spring night was cool but pleasant, with a full moon hanging low in the sky. Maple Street was one of the older neighborhoods in town, not wealthy but well kept, with mature trees lining both sides of the road. Number 347, Lally said, pointing to a 2-story house with dark windows. Looks empty to me. Tom pulled the patrol car to a stop across the street. Dispatch says the owners are the Wilsons, retired couple, gone to Florida for 2 weeks to visit their daughter. A middle-aged woman in a bathrobe hurried over as they got out of the car. I'm Nancy from next door, she said, wrapping her robe tighter against the evening chill. I called it in. The Wilsons left 12 days ago, and the house has been silent until tonight. What kind of noises did you hear, ma'am? Lily asked, taking out her notepad. Nancy pointed toward the house. At first, I thought it was the wind, but then I heard what sounded like scratching, then thumping. The strangest thing was, I could swear I heard crying. Not like a person crying, but I don't know how to describe it. Tom nodded politely, though he'd heard similar descriptions from nervous neighbors hundreds of times. We'll check it out. How long have the noises been happening? Started around dinner time. Gets louder, then stops, then starts again. Nancy looked embarrassed suddenly. I'm not one of those nosy neighbors, I promise. But with the Wilsons away, and those break-ins on Oak Street last month, you did the right thing, Lily assured her. Better safe than sorry. As they approached the house, Tom noticed the stack of newspapers piled on the porch, confirming the owner's absence. The windows were dark, curtains drawn. Nothing looked disturbed from the outside. Let's walk the perimeter first, Tom suggested, clicking on his flashlight. They circled the house slowly, checking windows, the back door, looking for any signs of forced entry. Everything seemed secure. Probably raccoons in the attic, Tom said, his voice low. Happens all the. He stopped mid-sentence. In the silence of the night, a faint sound drifted from somewhere inside the house. It was weak but distinct, a high-pitched, trembling cry that raised the hair on the back of his neck. Lily froze, her hand instinctively moving to her gun. That wasn't a raccoon. The cry came again, this time sounding even more desperate, more pained. There was something about it that tugged at Tom's heart, something that made 15 years of police training and experience suddenly inadequate. We need to get inside, he said quietly, all thoughts of his upcoming off-duty hours forgotten. Something's wrong in there. Tom and Lily stood silently for a moment, listening intently. The night air felt heavy around them, almost like it was holding its breath. Somewhere inside the dark house, that strange cry came again. We need to get in touch with the owners, Lily said, pulling out her phone. Nancy, do you have the Wilsons' contact information? The neighbor nodded quickly. I have Betty's cell number. They asked me to keep an eye on things. She fumbled with her own phone, hands slightly shaking from the night chill, or maybe from worry. While Nancy made the call, Tom walked carefully around the porch, shining his flashlight through windows. The beam cut through darkness, revealing a tidy living room with covered furniture. Nothing seemed out of place, no movement, no signs of trouble. Betty Wilson says we have her permission to enter, Lily announced, walking up behind Tom. She's worried sick, says they didn't have any pets and nobody should be inside. She's calling her daughter now to double-check if anyone was supposed to check on the house. Tom nodded and tested the front door. Locked tight. Let's try the back. The backyard was small but well kept. A bird bath stood in the center of a small garden. Wind chimes tinkled softly from the porch overhang. The officers moved carefully, their footsteps crunching on the gravel pathway. The back door was locked too, but Tom noticed a kitchen window was cracked open about an inch, probably for air circulation while the owners were away. Not enough for a person to enter, but maybe enough for something else. I think I know what might be going on, Tom said, his voice low. But we still need to check inside to be sure. Lily tried the window, pushing it up slowly. It opened without resistance. I can fit through here. Be careful, Tom warned. With practiced ease, Lily hoisted herself onto the windowsill and slipped through the opening. A few seconds later, Tom heard the back door unlock and Lily's face appeared. All clear so far, she whispered. They entered the kitchen together, flashlight beams sweeping across clean countertops and closed cabinets. The house had that distinct emptiness that comes when places usually filled with life stand vacant, an almost hollow quality to the air. Hello, Tom called out. Police officers, is anyone here? His voice echoed slightly. No response except for the faint ticking of a clock somewhere. Then they heard it again, that strange crying sound. Clearer now that they were inside. It was coming from below them. The basement, Lily said, pointing to a door near the refrigerator. Tom opened it carefully, revealing a set of wooden stairs descending into darkness. Their flashlight beams seemed swallowed by the blackness below. Hello, he called again, his voice bouncing off unseen walls. The cry responded, weaker now, but definitely coming from somewhere in the basement. I'll go first, Tom said, testing each step carefully as he made his way down. The wood creaked under his weight. The basement was cooler than the rest of the house. Their flashlights revealed a typical suburban storage area, cardboard boxes labeled Christmas and tax records, old furniture covered in sheets, a washing machine and dryer against one wall. Over there, Lily whispered, pointing her flashlight toward a corner behind the water heater. They moved forward together, the crying sound growing more distinct. Not human, but definitely alive. Desperate. In pain. As they reached the water heater, Tom crouched down, moving his flashlight beam slowly across the concrete floor. And then they saw it, a small opening in the wall, barely visible, where the baseboard didn't quite meet the floor. Oh my God, Lily gasped. In the narrow space, two reflective eyes blinked back at them. A skinny cat, fur-matted and dirty, lay curled in the tiny cave-like space. And nestled against her, almost hidden by her thin body, were 5 tiny forms, kittens, their eyes barely open, making those pitiful cries they'd heard from outside. Tom swallowed hard. The mother cat looked up at them, not with fear, but with what seemed like desperate hope. Her sides heaved with each breath. She was clearly starving, dehydrated, trapped. She must have gotten in through the window crack to have her babies, Lily said softly, then got trapped when it closed more. The smallest kitten, barely bigger than Tom's thumb, let out another cry, the same sound that had brought them rushing into the house. So small, yet fighting so hard to live. Tom felt something catch in his throat as he looked at the tiny family. 15 years on the force, and sometimes it was still the smallest, most unexpected things that hit him hardest. We need to help them, he said simply. Right now. Lily quickly pulled out her phone and turned on its flashlight for better visibility. The mother cat blinked in the southern brightness, but didn't move from her kittens. Her ribs showed clearly through her dirty fur, and her eyes were dull with exhaustion. She had clearly been surviving on whatever small amount of water might have dripped from the pipes and whatever mice or insects she could catch in the basement. Poor thing must have been here the whole time the Wilsons were gone, Tom said, kneeling down to get a better look. Almost 2 weeks with no real food or water. The mother cat made a soft sound, somewhere between a meow and a moan. One of the kittens, a tiny gray ball of fluff smaller than the rest, let out another weak cry. "We need water and food right away," Lily said, standing up. "I'll check upstairs for anything we can use." While Lily hurried back up the basement stairs, Tom stayed with the cat family. He'd never been much of an animal person. His ex-wife had taken care of their daughter's goldfish and hamsters, but something about the mother cat's determined struggle to keep her babies alive touched him deeply. "Hang in there," he said softly. "Help's coming." To his surprise, the mother cat slowly blinked at him, then extended her neck slightly, as if trying to sniff his hand. Tom carefully reached out, letting her catch his scent. After a moment's hesitation, she bumped her head weakly against his fingers. "Tom," Lily called from upstairs. "I found some tuna in the pantry and a bowl for water." A few minutes later, Lily returned with a small dish of water and an open can of tuna. The smell filled the basement immediately. The mother cat's ears perked up, but she didn't leave her kittens. "Here," Tom said, taking the bowl of water. He placed it close enough for the cat to reach without abandoning her babies. She stretched her neck and began lapping at it desperately. "I've called animal control," Lily said, watching the cat drink. "They're swamped with that situation at the apartment fire across town. Said it might be a couple hours before they can get here." Tom frowned, looking at the smallest kitten. Its tiny chest was rising and falling rapidly, too rapidly. That little one might not have a couple hours. Lily knelt down and carefully placed small bits of tuna near the mother cat. The cat devoured them between drinks of water. Nancy said there's a vet clinic about 10 minutes from here. The one on Elm Street. "Will they be open this late?" Tom asked, checking his watch. It was almost 11 p.m. now. "Worth a shot," Lily replied, already dialing her phone. "If not, I know Dr. Pete who runs it. He gave a talk at my nephew's career day. Seemed like a nice guy." While Lily made the call, Tom noticed the smallest kitten wasn't moving much anymore. Its eyes were closed, and its breathing seemed even more labored. Without thinking, he reached into the small space and gently touched the tiny creature with one finger. It was cold. Too cold. "Hey, little fighter," he whispered. "Don't give up now." The kitten made no response. The mother cat watched Tom but didn't hiss or try to stop him from touching her baby. She seemed to understand he was trying to help. "Good news," Lily said, putting down her phone. "Dr. Pate was just closing up. He says to bring them in right away." "How do we move them safely?" Tom asked, still worried about the smallest kitten. Lily was already taking off her uniform jacket. "We can make a nest with this. The important thing is to keep them together and warm." Tom nodded and carefully helped Lily spread the jacket on the floor near the opening. The mother cat watched them intently, her eyes following their every move. "It's okay," Tom said to her, not feeling silly at all for talking to a cat. "We're going to help your babies." With gentle movements, they coaxed the mother cat onto the jacket. She was so weak she could barely walk, but she managed to drag herself onto the fabric. Once she was settled, they carefully moved each kitten, one by one, placing them against her belly where they could nurse if they had the strength. The smallest one, the gray one that had first caught Tom's attention, felt like almost nothing in his palm. A tiny scrap of life, barely hanging on. "This one's in bad shape," he said, his voice catching unexpectedly. Lily looked at the tiny kitten in Tom's large rough hand and nodded. "Then we better hurry." Tom carried the makeshift nest up the basement stairs while Lily led the way, holding doors open and turning on lights. The mother cat lay still in the jacket, too weak to protest being moved. Her 5 kittens huddled against her, all except the tiny gray one, which Tom had carefully placed in his shirt pocket, close to his body heat. "I'll update Nancy while you get them in the car," Lily said as they reached the front door. The neighbor was still standing on her porch across the street, arms wrapped around herself against the night chill. Tom nodded and continued to the patrol car, moving with careful steps. He could feel the small kitten's heart beating against his chest through his uniformed shirt, a rapid, fluttering pulse like a hummingbird's wings. Hang in there, little guy, he whispered, opening the back door of the patrol car. He placed Lily's jacket with the mother cat and 4 kittens on the seat, making sure they were secure. Then, with hands that had handcuffed suspects and held weapons, but now moved with surprising gentleness, he took the gray kitten from his pocket. The tiny creature felt cold despite being nestled against his warmth. Its breathing was shallow, coming in small, irregular gasps. Tom cupped it in both hands, bringing it close to his face. "Don't you quit on me now," he said softly. "You've made it this far." To his surprise, the kitten's eyes, barely opened slits of blue, seemed to look directly at him. Its tiny pink mouth opened in what might have been a meow, but no sound came out. Lily jogged back to the car. "Nancy's going to call the Wilsons and let them know what happened. She said they'll be horrified. They love animals." She slid into the driver's seat and looked back at Tom, still standing by the open rear door. "Everything okay?" Tom carefully placed the tiny kitten back with its mother, who immediately began licking its head. "This one's fading fast. We need to go." The drive to the vet clinic took just under 10 minutes, but it felt like hours. Every time they hit a bump in the road, Tom winced, turning to check on the cat family. The mother had curled around her babies, trying to share what little body heat she had. "Almost there," Lily said, turning onto Elm Street. The vet clinic's lights were still on, a beacon in the otherwise dark row of businesses. Dr. Pate was waiting at the door, a tall man with a salt and pepper beard and glasses. He held the door open as Tom carefully carried in the jacket nest, Lily close behind. "Bring them straight back," the vet said, leading them through the waiting area to an exam room. A young woman in scrubs, his assistant, was already preparing the metal exam table with a soft blanket. "Found them trapped in a basement," Tom explained as he gently set the cats down. "Mother's been there almost 2 weeks with no food or water. The kittens can't be more than a few days old." Dr. Pate nodded, already examining the mother cat with practiced hands. "She's severely dehydrated, but still producing milk somehow. Amazing what a mother will do for her babies." He looked up at Tom. "You did right bringing them in right away." The vet's assistant was counting the kittens. 5 total, she said. Then her face fell as she picked up the tiny gray one. "This one's in trouble." Tom felt his chest tighten. In 15 years of police work, he'd seen plenty of death, car accidents, overdoses, even homicides. But somehow, the thought of this tiny kitten dying hit him hard. Dr. Pate took the kitten from his assistant, examining it closely. Hypothermic, dehydrated, probably hypoglycemic too. He looked at Tom and Lily. "I need to work quickly. You're welcome to wait in the reception area. This might take a while." Lily nodded and turned to go, but Tom hesitated. The tiny gray kitten lay motionless on the exam table, looking even smaller under the bright medical lights. "Will it make it?" he asked, his voice rougher than he intended. Dr. Pate's face was serious. "I can't make any promises. This little one's fighting against some tough odds." Tom nodded slowly. He'd seen that look before on human doctors' faces in emergency rooms. It wasn't good. "But," Dr. Pate added, already reaching for supplies, "it's made it this far when it probably should have died days ago. That tells me it's a fighter." As Tom turned to follow Lily to the waiting room, he felt something wet on his cheek. He reached up, surprised to find a tear rolling down his face. He quickly wiped it away before Lily could see. "Come on, little fighter," he whispered. "Don't give up now." The waiting room at the vet clinic was small but comfortable. Posters of healthy pets covered the walls, and a shelf held pamphlets about heartworm prevention and the importance of spaying and neutering. Tom and Lily sat in the plastic chairs, both still in uniform, both staring at the closed door that led to the exam rooms. "You should head home," Lily said after they'd been waiting about 20 minutes. "Your daughter's soccer game is in the morning. You need sleep." Tom shook his head. "I'm staying." He didn't fully understand it himself, why he felt so attached to a stray cat and her kittens, especially that tiny gray one. Maybe it was the way the mother had fought so hard to keep her babies alive in that basement. Maybe it was how the smallest kitten had looked right at him with those barely open eyes. Whatever the reason, he couldn't leave now. "I'll call the station and let them know we'll be late filing our report," Lily said, pulling out her phone. While she stepped outside to make the call, Tom found himself pacing the small waiting room. The clock on the wall seemed to be moving in slow motion. He thought about texting his ex-wife to tell her he might be late for picking up their daughter, but decided to wait. No point worrying her until he knew how long this would take. The door to the exam room opened and Dr. Pete's assistant came out. Her scrubs now had wet spots on them, and she looked tired but smiled when she saw Tom. "The mother cat is responding well to fluids," she said. "We've got her on a heating pad and she's already looking better. 4 of the kittens are stable." Tom waited, his heart suddenly pounding. "And the 5th, the little gray one?" The assistant's smile faded slightly. "Dr. Pate is still working on that one. It's touch and go." She hesitated, then added, "He asked me to let you know it might be a while longer. You're welcome to come back tomorrow to check on them." "I'm staying," Tom said firmly. The assistant nodded, looking at him curiously. "You really care about these cats, don't you?" Tom wasn't sure how to answer. Yesterday, he would have said he wasn't much of an animal person, yet here he was, losing sleep over a stray kitten. "I guess I do," he finally said. Lily returned just as the assistant went back into the exam room. "Everything okay?" "Mother and 4 kittens are stable," Tom explained. "They're still working on the little gray one." Lily nodded and sat back down. "I called our supervisor. Told him we're handling an emergency animal welfare situation. He wasn't thrilled about the overtime, but he said to do what we need to do." The minutes ticked by slowly. Tom checked his watch again and again. An hour passed. Then another. Lily had fallen asleep in her chair, head tilted at an uncomfortable angle against the wall. Tom couldn't sleep. Every time he closed his eyes, he saw that tiny kitten fighting for breath. It was just past 2 a.m. when the exam room door opened again. Dr. Pete emerged, looking exhausted. His glasses sat crooked on his nose, and his scrubs were rumpled and stained. Tom stood up immediately, his heart in his throat. Dr. Pete looked surprised to see him still there. "You waited all this time?" Tom nodded, not trusting himself to speak. The vet adjusted his glasses and ran a hand through his disheveled hair. "Well, I'm glad you did. I thought you'd want to know." He paused, and Tom felt his stomach twist with dread. Then Dr. Pete smiled, a tired smile, but genuine. "The little gray one is hanging in there. I had to tube feed it, get its blood sugar up, and we're still working on its temperature, but it's responding. Started moving around a bit about 20 minutes ago." Tom let out a breath he hadn't realized he was holding. "So it's going to make it." "I wouldn't go that far yet," Dr. Pete cautioned. "The next 24 hours will be critical, but it's fighting hard." He studied Tom's face for a moment. "Would you like to see them?" Without hesitation, Tom nodded. Lily was still asleep in her chair, and he decided to let her rest. He followed Dr. Pate through the door into the back area of the clinic. In a small room with soft lighting, the mother cat lay on a padded bed, an IV line running into her front leg. She looked up when they entered, her eyes more alert now. And nestled against her belly, 5 kittens nursed weakly, including a tiny gray one, smaller than the rest but visibly moving. "Hey there, little fighter," Tom whispered, a lump forming in his throat. "You're doing it." Tom finally went home around 3 a.m., but only after Dr. Pate promised to call with any changes in the kitten's condition. He managed a few hours of sleep before his alarm blared at 7 a.m., reminding him of his daughter's soccer game. Throughout the morning, as he cheered on the sidelines, his mind kept drifting back to the tiny gray kitten and its fight for survival. When his phone rang just after noon, he excused himself from the post-game celebration pizza and stepped outside the restaurant to answer it. "Officer Rodriguez? It's Dr. Pate from Pine Street Animal Clinic." Tom's grip tightened on his phone. "How are they doing?" "The mother and 4 of the kittens are improving steadily," the vet said. "We've got them eating and drinking, and their vital signs are good." Tom closed his eyes, bracing himself for bad news about the 5th kitten. "And the little gray one?" To his surprise, Dr. Pete chuckled. "That's actually why I'm calling. The little one has quite a spirit. It's gained 6 grams since last night and is nursing like a champ. I thought you'd want to know." A weight lifted from Tom's chest. "That's great news." "It's still not completely out of the woods," Dr. Pete cautioned. "But honestly, I wasn't sure it would make it through the night. Now, I'd say its chances are pretty good." After hanging up, Tom stared at his phone for a long moment. His 10-year-old daughter, Katie, came outside looking for him. "Dad? Is everything okay? You're missing the pizza." Tom smiled and put his arm around her shoulders. "Everything's fine, kiddo. Just got some good news about a case I'm working on." That evening, after dropping Katie back at her mother's house, Tom found himself driving to the animal clinic instead of heading home. He told himself it was just to check in officially for the police report, but deep down, he knew there was more to it. The clinic was quiet when he arrived. A different assistant was at the front desk, a young man with curly hair who looked up from his computer. "Can I help you, officer?" "I'm here about the cats that were brought in last night," Tom explained. "Basement rescue." The young man's eyes lit up with recognition. "Oh, right. Dr. Pate said you might stop by. They're in the recovery room. I can take you back if you want." The recovery room was warm and dimly lit. Several cages lined one wall, but only one was occupied. The mother cat lay on a soft blanket, looking much better than the night before. Her fur had been cleaned, and though still thin, she seemed more alert. The kittens were nursing, their tiny bodies moving as they fed. Quite a change from last night, isn't it? Tom turned to see Dr. Pete entering the room, a clipboard in hand. "They look so much better," Tom said, leaning down to get a closer look. The mother cat blinked slowly at him, then resumed grooming one of her kittens. "I've been doing this job for 20 years, Dr. Pete said, standing beside Tom, "and I still get amazed by how resilient animals can be." He pointed to the gray kitten, now visibly stronger than the night before. "That one should have died in that basement. By all medical logic, it shouldn't have survived being so cold and dehydrated for so long." Tom watched the tiny kitten, its belly now round with milk, little paws kneading against its mother. "What happens to them now?" "We'll keep them here until they're stable enough to move. The mother needs to gain weight, and the kittens need to be a bit older before they can be separated from her." Dr. Pete made a note on his clipboard. "After that, they'll go to the county shelter. They're usually good about finding homes for kittens." Tom frowned slightly. "The shelter? Aren't those usually pretty crowded?" Dr. Pate nodded. "Unfortunately, yes. They do their best, but—" He let the sentence hang. Tom continued watching the kittens, particularly the gray one. After a moment of silence, he asked, "What if someone wanted to adopt one directly? Is that possible?" Dr. Pate looked at Tom with surprise, then understanding dawned on his face. "I suppose that could be arranged." A small smile played at the corner of his mouth. "Did you have a particular kitten in mind?" Tom felt almost embarrassed, but nodded toward the gray one. "That little fighter? Yeah, I think I do." 3 months later, the police station was buzzing with activity. The annual Community Appreciation Day was in full swing, with officers giving tours to local families and showing off police equipment to wide-eyed children. Tom stood near the dispatch desk, straightening his dress uniform for the 5th time that morning. "Nervous about your speech?" Lily asked, appearing beside him with 2 paper cups of coffee. She handed one to Tom. "Thanks," he said, taking a sip. "And yeah, a little. Never been one for public speaking." Chief Wilson walked over, clipboard in hand. "You're up in 5 minutes, Rodriguez. The mayor just arrived, so we're ready to start the awards." Tom nodded and took another drink of coffee to calm his nerves. When the chief walked away, Lily gave Tom an encouraging pat on the shoulder. "You deserve this recognition," she said. "What you did wasn't in any training manual." Soon everyone gathered in the station's community room. Rows of folding chairs faced a small podium, now almost completely filled with local residents, officers, and their families. Tom stood at the back, waiting for his name to be called. Chief Wilson tapped the microphone and welcomed everyone to the department's Community Appreciation Day. After a brief introduction, he turned to the main event. "Today, we're recognizing one of our officers for going above and beyond the call of duty," the chief said. "What started as a routine noise complaint turned into something that touched our entire community." As the chief recounted the story of the basement rescue, Tom found himself thinking about how much had changed in 3 months. The Wilsons had returned from Florida, horrified to learn what had happened in their basement. They'd made a generous donation to the animal clinic to cover all the medical costs for the mother cat and her kittens. And now, the chief concluded, I'd like to call Officer Tom Rodriguez to say a few words." The applause startled Tom from his thoughts. He made his way to the podium, straightening his tie one last time. "Thank you, Chief," he began, looking out at the sea of faces. "I'm not much for speeches, so I'll keep this simple. That night, we were just doing our job, responding to a call, checking things out. I never expected it would change my life." Tom cleared his throat. "In 15 years of police work, I've learned that sometimes the smallest things make the biggest difference. That night, the smallest thing was a tiny gray kitten fighting against impossible odds. From the front row, his daughter Katie beamed up at him. Beside her sat his ex-wife, who had surprised him by coming to support him today. I've always believed my job is to protect and serve," Tom continued. "That night, I learned that sometimes those we protect and serve have 4 legs instead of 2, and sometimes they teach us as much as we help them." As Tom finished his short speech, the door at the back of the room opened. Dr. Pete walked in, carrying a small pet carrier. Right on time. Before we finished, Tom said, "I'd like you to meet someone special." Dr. Pete brought the carrier to the front of the room. Tom knelt down and opened the door, reaching inside. He pulled out a sleek, healthy gray cat, no longer a tiny, struggling kitten, but a lively young cat with bright eyes and a playful spirit. "This is Hope," Tom said, holding the cat up for everyone to see. 3 months ago, she was barely alive in a dark basement. Today, she's the newest member of our family." Hope squirmed in his hands, comfortable and clearly used to being held by him. The audience broke into applause as Tom handed the cat to Katie, who had rushed forward to take her pet. The other kittens and their mother all found good homes too, Tom added as Katie returned to her seat, cuddling Hope. Mrs. Wilson from Maple Street adopted the mother cat. 2 families on Oak Street each took a kitten. Officer Lily Chen adopted one, and Dr. Pate kept one at the clinic as the official greeter. As Tom looked around the room, he saw many smiling faces and even a few teary eyes. What had started as a routine call had created a ripple of compassion throughout the community. Sometimes, Tom concluded, his own voice growing rough with emotion, it's the smallest things that remind us why we do this job. Hope reminded me that every life matters, no matter how small. And that's something I'll carry with me on every call, every shift, every day.